Matt Murdock is coming out of prison a changed man, but will his own personal revelations end up having ripple effects across the superhero world? Well, let's hop into the pages of Daredevil issue number 36 and find out together, shall we? So then, picking up from where the last issue left off, Daredevil had managed to escape from prison ever so briefly to help Elektra and the other heroes deal with the cloned Bullseye problem. On one hand, this was good because he was greatly able to help. On the other hand, though, he did still technically break the law, and this led to a rather tense standoff between the NYPD and the superhero community. A video of the standoff went viral on the internet, and because of that, a lot of lines are getting drawn in a lot of different sand. But we'll be sure to circle back to this one in a minute. Matt ultimately does end up getting released from jail a few weeks later, due in no small part to him helping to unravel a massive conspiracy within the New York penal system, but also because his two lawyers, Foggy Nelson and Christian McDuffie, managed to work some real legal magic on their end. It's because of that you'll understand that they're both kind of shocked and amazed that when Matt gets out of jail, he chooses not to go with them, but instead to take a much-needed ride with Elektra. Now from there, we transition on over to the Kingpin and Typhoid Mary. Wilson had popped the question at the end of the previous issue, and now they're working on getting all the preparations done for their wedding, and I'm not gonna lie, I totally would have read a whole mini-series about these murderous supervillains picking hors d'oeuvres and cummerbunds and venues. Mary wishes that they could just elope, but unfortunately with Fisk being mayor, a wedding is a great time to glad hand reward one's friends and punish one's enemies. Speaking of which, Wesley kills the mood when he reminds Wilson about the power struggle happening in Hell's Kitchen right now. Izzy Libra is stepping down and Butch is stepping up. And it seems the only person who can actually correct the balance of power is the Kingpin himself, but again, we'll circle on back to this. We check back on in with Matt and Elektra, who have driven themselves out to the countryside to have a very much needed heart-to-heart. Matt ends up saying what I'm sure a lot of us were thinking, and that is, did Elektra really plan on just dressing up like Daredevil and fighting crime in hopes that it would ingratiate Matt enough to her that they would get married? And in doing so, complete Elektra's own prophecy to defeat the Hand once and for all? Indeed, Elektra admits that that was her plan initially, but being Daredevil, being a superhero crawling around in Matt's head has given her a new understanding, a new lease on life. And to be fair, Matt can relate. Going to prison, seeing the harsher side of life and the true depths of corruption in his city has changed him as well too. Deep down, these two were always madly in love with each other, and maybe they needed these seismic life changes for them to finally admit it and get together for real this time. And yes, you don't have to be a biblical scholar to figure that all this water fits into a much bigger rebirth and rebaptism imagery. Plus, I'm sure after all that time in prison without a conjugal visit, Matt's just that much happier to get to see Elektra again. Now back over with Butch, he's buying up a bunch of property in Hell's Kitchen to further strengthen his stranglehold on the community. It's there he comes face to face with his estranged father, and yes, Wilson does in so many words admit that he does know that Butch is actually his son, but also that Wilson isn't the kind of man who puts a lot of stock in family bonds. After all, his other son, the Rose, came back to life just recently, and we haven't seen him at all. If Fisk would be that cold and callous to the son that he actually recognizes, imagine how cold and callous he would be to Butch, who was trying to make plays on his territory. Of course, what happens in the life of Butch also happens in the life of Matt Murdock, who is assisting Butch in this hostile takeover of power. Butch figures the only way that they're going to be able to get what they want is if they kill Izzy. Mike might be a schemer and a scumbag, but he most certainly doesn't want to be a murderer, not yet anyway. It's at this time too Matt just happens to return home where Mike has been living as Matt. Mike, of course, still having no idea that his brother is actually Daredevil. Matt knows that he's going to have to untangle a whole twisted web with Mike, but he doesn't want to do it right now. He just wants to get back to basics, fighting crime as Daredevil. Though as we quickly see, Matt's time in prison has greatly affected how he deals with crime and criminality. He runs into a pair of convenience store bandits, and instead of brutally beating the crap out of them like he normally would, he instead talks them down and actually manages to de-escalate the situation. He gives the money back to the clerk and tells the two bandits that they better go home, call someone they love, and finally ask for help. After all, no one goes out and robs a convenience store because shit's going good in their lives, am I right? And what's Daredevil supposed to do? Beat them up and wait for the cops to do their job? Pfft. This whole series has basically been one giant indictment of the NYPD and how they're so mired in sleaze and corruption. It's amazing amazing they do anything. Obviously, this new change in crime fighting catches the ire of old heads like Mr. Fantastic Reed Richards. Reed uncharacteristically has stepped down from his perch today to talk to Matt about the growing tensions between the superhero community and the cops. Obviously, when they stood up for Daredevil, they were protecting one of their own, but now Reed fears what might be happening next. He says that it feels a lot like what happened back in Civil War with the superhero registration program. Heroes get a lot of leeway with the legal system and the powers that be, but that relationship won't last forever if Daredevil keeps spitting in the face of authority like he is. Matt is surprisingly unshook by the First Father's words, saying that maybe Reed, being the smartest man in the world, should take some of that insight and turn it inward every so often. And that maybe he's not so much worried about what's going to happen to the superhero community as a whole, but worried about losing his own personal leeway. Again, let us not forget that Reed backed the government and the powers that be during Civil War. Still, though, as far as Matt is concerned, all of this is a problem for another day. A problem for today, though, is what is to be done with Kingpin. Matt's pretty damn certain the whole Bullseye and his clones crisis came from FISK himself. He can't prove it, but he decides to put the fear in him at his own wedding. Daredevil says that deep down, he and FISK are a lot alike. Hard men from hard parts of the world who have an even harder time letting people in. Maybe that's why their hate and rivalry runs so deep. They both see something in the other person that reflects in themselves and they don't like it. For years, they've torn strips out of each other, ruined each other's lives, see them brought low only to rise again. It's like a boxing match that never ends. Matt, though, has learned a lot in the last little bit and wants to try and break this vicious cycle. He knows that Kingpin is getting married and he actually wants him to be happy. He wants him to be content with Mary. And as corny as it might sound, he hopes the love of a good, or in this case not that good woman, will actually allow Wilson Fisk to become a better version of himself. One not ruled by greed or malice. The funny thing is that Elektra doesn't believe their marriage will last any longer than 6 months. Though in reality, the real cracks start to appear only a week later. You see, it's on their honeymoon Wilson starts getting nostalgic and going through a bunch of his old files. He kept his most important ones at his summer house, you see. Earlier in the story, we were reminded of how Daredevil was actually able to make the entire world forget that he was Matt Murdock by using the help of the Purple Children and mass hypnosis. This means that someone could look directly at a front page article saying that Matt Murdock was Daredevil and end up seeing nothing at all. Kingpin digs out his old Murdock papers, and when he sees nothing but blank pages, something actively breaks inside him, a mystery that's now going to consume him and probably destroy his new marriage. And so that was Daredevil issue number 36, everybody, and overall I thought it was another great issue and an excellent way to kick off the Devil's Reign event. I'm very interested to see a bunch of these different ideas and concepts that Zdarsky has been playing with here be expanded to the rest of the Marvel Universe. I love seeing Elektra and Matt grow so much as people and Kingpin ultimately not being able to grow, which is why he'll forever be stuck as a villain. It's just so damn impressive how this book is able to do so much in just 22 pages. And I truly do believe that the best is still yet to come. Overall, I'd give this one a very solid 9 out of 10. This is just damn good.
Hey there everyone, Kate Joel again, and I just want to thank you so much for watching to the end of the video. It means a lot to me. And hey, if you enjoyed the book I covered in this issue and want some comics of your own, might I recommend Book Depository? It's my #1 place for shopping for comic book trades. You get a great price, and if you use my link down in the description, you'll actually be helping me out at the same time. You get something, I get something, everybody wins, right? So until next time everyone, I've been Joel, and I will see you in the next video. Bye-bye.